5 years ago, he looked his pregnant wife in the eye and told her he was leaving her for another woman. She was 7 months along, carrying his twins, alone in an empty house at 34 weeks. He never looked back. He never came to the hospital. He never held his newborn son. He never kissed his baby daughter's forehead. He chose his mistress. He chose the penthouse. He chose the lie. But today, at his own mother's funeral, he will look up from the open grave and see her standing at the back of the crowd, still beautiful, still dignified, still carrying the weight of what he did. And beside her, 2 small hands gripping hers, a little boy in a gray sweater, a little girl with a daisy in her fist, the twins he abandoned before they were born, the twins he has never met. What happens when a billionaire finally sees the family he threw away? What does a woman say to the man who left her bleeding, pregnant, and alone when he comes crawling back 5 years too late? Does she forgive him? Does she destroy him? Or does she do something far more powerful than either? This is a story about betrayal, about survival, about the quiet, unstoppable strength of a woman who refused to be broken. Stay with us until the very end, because the real twist isn't at the funeral. It's what his dying mother left behind, in a letter only she was meant to read. Lesson/meaning statement. This story is a reminder that the deepest revenge isn't rage. It isn't ruining the one who ruined you. The most powerful answer to betrayal is to quietly build a life so full, so peaceful, and so truly yours, that one day you wake up and realize you've forgotten to hate him at all. That is freedom. That is healing. That is the woman every one of us has the right to become.
Mommy, there's a black envelope on the porch. Nora froze. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers. It hit the counter. It did not break, but a dark pool spread across the wood, and she did not move to wipe it up. Are you sure, baby? She asked. It's big. It's shiny. It has gold on it. Bennett stood in the kitchen doorway in his dinosaur pajamas. He was 4 years old and serious as a small judge. His sister Bee sat at the table, braiding her doll's hair with slow, patient fingers. Stay here a minute, sweetheart, Nora said. I'll go look. She walked to the front door. Her bare feet made no sound on the old pine floor. Outside, the morning was pale and cold. October, the kind of morning that smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke. The envelope sat on the welcome mat. Heavy cream paper, black border, a gold wax seal she had not seen in almost 5 years. The Vance family crest. She picked it up. Her hands knew the weight of that paper before her mind did. Thick, expensive. The kind of paper that announced weddings and funerals and nothing in between. She carried it inside. She set it on the counter next to the spilled coffee. She did not open it. Bennett, honey, go wake up Biscuit. He needs to go outside. Okay, Mommy. He ran off. His small feet thumped up the stairs. Bee watched her mother with the steady gaze of a child who noticed everything. Mommy, what's in the envelope? I don't know yet, baby. Why don't you open it? Because sometimes grown-ups need a minute before they open things. Bee nodded. She went back to her doll. She accepted that answer the way children accept weather. It simply was. Nora made the oatmeal. She packed 2 lunches. She buttered 2 slices of toast. She did all the things she did every morning, and the envelope sat on the counter, and she did not look at it. She drove the twins to preschool. She kissed them both on the tops of their heads. She told them she loved them. She drove home. Only then, in the empty kitchen, with Biscuit, the rescue mutt, curled at her feet, did she slide a thumbnail under the wax seal. The card inside was heavy, embossed. The kind of script that took a calligrapher 3 hours to master. Margaret Ashford Vance, beloved mother and friend. Services Saturday, 11 o'clock in the morning. Ashford Cemetery. Reception to follow at the Vance estate. And below, in a hand that was not the funeral home's, a hand Nora had not seen in 4 months, since the last birthday card, the last unopened check, was one short note. Nora, please come. Bring them. She would have wanted you there. Colette. Nora sat down on the kitchen floor. She sat with her back against the cabinet. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. The way her therapist had taught her 5 years ago, when the world had cracked open and she had been 7 months pregnant and alone in an empty house. 1, 2, 3. Biscuit rested his chin on her knee. I knew this day would come, she thought. I have been waiting for this day for 4 years, and now it is here, and I am sitting on the kitchen floor, and I do not know what to do. Margaret was dead. Margaret, who had called her every month for 4 years. Margaret, who had sent birthday cards with crisp $20 bills tucked inside, addressed to Master Bennett and Miss Beatrice Caldwell. Margaret, who had driven 2 hours in a snowstorm the February the twins had the flu, and left a pot of chicken soup on the porch, and turned around and driven 2 hours home, because she knew Nora was not ready to see her yet. Margaret, who had said once, on the phone, in a voice like old velvet, "My son is a coward. I am not. I will wait for you. I will be here when you are ready." And Nora had never been ready, and now Margaret was dead. Nora pressed her palms flat against the floor. She felt the cold seep into her hands. She breathed. "I owe her this," she said out loud, to the dog, to the empty kitchen, to the woman she used to be. "I don't owe him anything, but I owe her this." Biscuit thumped his tail once. She stood up. She wiped the spilled coffee. She rinsed the mug. She put it back on its hook. Then she went upstairs to her bedroom and opened the closet. At the very back, behind the canvas work pants and the flannels and the sundresses she wore to the farmer's market, was a garment bag she had not touched in 4 years and 7 months. She unzipped it slowly. Inside was a black dress, simple, knee-length, the kind of dress a woman wore when she did not want to be looked at. She had bought it for a funeral that had never happened. Weston's great-uncle, who had died the week before Weston left her. She had never worn it. She had zipped it back into the bag and hung it in the very back of the closet, and she had promised herself she would throw it out one day. She had not. She laid the dress on the bed. Her phone rang. Darla. "Nora. Sweetheart, I just heard. Margaret Vance. It's in the paper. I got the invitation this morning." "Are you going?" There was a long pause. Nora sat on the edge of the bed. The black dress lay between them, quiet as a pressed flower. "Yes." "Honey, he'll be there. I know." "Nora, listen to me. You do not owe that family anything. You do not have to put yourself through this. Margaret is not that family. Margaret was mine." Darla was quiet for a long moment. Nora could hear her breathing. She could hear the faint clatter of the bakery in the background, the espresso machine hissing, someone laughing by the register. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No, I want to take the twins." "Oh, Nora." She asked for them. In the note, Colette asked, "Sweetheart, I have to do this, Darla. If I don't go, I will spend the rest of my life wishing I had." "Okay," Darla said. Her voice was soft. "Okay, then I'll be at your house at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. I'll do your hair, I'll make you coffee, and then I will watch you drive away, and I will be here when you get home. Thank you. Don't thank me, sweetheart, just come home." Nora ended the call. She set the phone down on the bed. She thought about the twins. She thought about how to tell them. She walked downstairs. She stood at the window and watched the wind pull the last yellow leaves off the oak in the front yard. I am not going to run, she thought. I am not going to shrink. Not today, not ever again. I am going to put on that dress, and I am going to drive to that cemetery, and I am going to say goodbye to a woman who loved me. And if he is there, he is there, and I will survive him the same way I have survived every day since he left. She stood at the window for a long time. Then she went upstairs and began to iron the dress. The gravel crunched under the tires. Too many black cars lined the long drive, town cars, European sedans, a single silver hearse. Already emptied. Nora slowed the minivan. She pulled to the far end of the row and parked under a bare oak tree. "Mommy, is this a church?" "No, baby, this is a cemetery. It's where we come to say goodbye to people we loved." Bea considered this from the back seat. She was wearing the navy blue dress Darla had sewn for her 3rd birthday. Bennett wore a small gray sweater and dark pants. Nora had not wanted them in black. She had not wanted them to match the coats of the people who had let her go. "Who are we saying goodbye to?" Bennett asked. "A woman named Margaret. She was very kind. Did she know us?" Nora turned around in the driver's seat. She looked at her son. His hair stuck up in the back the way it always did, no matter how she combed it. "She knew you very much, baby. She loved you. She told me she loved you every time we talked. She was your grandmother." Bennett thought about this. Why didn't she come to our house? Because grown-ups sometimes make mistakes. And sometimes the mistakes take a long time to fix. And sometimes people run out of time before they can fix them. "Oh," Bennett said. He was satisfied. He unbuckled his car seat. They walked up the gravel drive together. Bennett held her left hand. Bea held her right. The wind lifted Nora's hair and pulled at the hem of the black dress. The sky was the color of old pewter. She smelled cold, damp earth. She smelled the faint sweetness of lilies from a standing spray someone had carried past. She heard a crow call once from the top of the oldest oak, and then the low murmur of 100 mourners, gathered in a loose half-circle around an open grave. She stopped at the back of the crowd. She did not step forward. She did not need to. "Mommy," Bea whispered, "everyone is sad." "Yes, baby." "Are we sad too?" "Yes, sweetheart. I am very sad. I loved her." Bea squeezed her hand. Nora looked across the crowd. She saw the backs of expensive coats. She saw a woman with silver hair that she recognized even from the back. Colette, Weston's aunt, Margaret's younger sister. Colette must have felt her looking. She turned, her eyes found Nora at the back of the crowd. She looked at the twins. Her hand went to her mouth for one brief moment. Then she lowered it. She nodded once, a small, grateful nod. The kind of nod that said, "Thank you for coming, and I am so sorry, and your children are beautiful all at once." Then Colette turned back to the grave. Nora breathed. The Reverend was speaking. She caught pieces, a woman of sharp wit and deep kindness, a mother who loved without condition, a friend who kept her promises, even the ones she made in private. The old man's voice carried well in the cold air. His name was Reverend Thomas Sheridan. Margaret had mentioned him often. He had baptized Weston. He had married them. He had buried Weston's father, and now he was burying Margaret. "Mommy, look." Bea tugged at Nora's hand. She pointed. A man stood at the head of the grave, next to the Reverend. Tall, gray at the temples, a black suit that hung on him the way suits hang on men who have stopped eating properly. Alone, no one beside him, no woman, no friend, no one. "Weston." Nora's chest tightened. She made herself breathe. 1, 2, 3. He had not seen her yet. He stood with his head bowed. his hands clasped in front of him, his shoulders narrower than she remembered. Stranger, she thought. That is a stranger. I lived with him for 4 years. I slept beside him. I carried his children. And I am looking at a stranger. It was not grief she felt. It was something colder, a kind of clean, surprised clarity, as if she had spent years expecting to see a wolf, and had finally seen one, and realized it was only a middle-aged man in an expensive coat. The wind lifted her veil. The crow called again. Bennett gripped her hand tighter. The Reverend said the final prayer. The mourners murmured Amen in a soft, low chorus. And then, the way mourners do, they began to shift. Small movements, a handkerchief to an eye, a hand on an elbow. The slow, reluctant dispersal that meant the service was over. And Bee, 4 years old, curious, bright, her hand suddenly slipping from Nora's, walked forward. Bee, honey, come back. Come. But Bee did not hear her, or did not listen. She walked through the parting crowd like a small boat through loose ice. She was holding something in her fist, a daisy. She had picked it on the way up the drive, and Nora had let her keep it, because Nora had not had the heart to say no to a daisy. Bee walked right up to the edge of the open grave. She laid the daisy on the dark wood of the casket. She said, very clearly, in the voice of a child who believed the person she was speaking to could hear, "Goodbye, grandmother. Mommy says you loved us." The crowd went still, and Weston, who had not looked up through the entire service, looked up. He saw the child first. He saw her small navy dress and her pale hair in 2 neat braids and her tiny hand still resting on the casket. He saw the daisy. Then he saw the boy. Bennett had followed his sister. He stood a half-step behind her, protective, his small gray sweater, his serious face. Then, slowly, because the eye follows the line of the children, he looked up. He saw Nora, and the color drained from his face, the way water drains from a cracked glass, all at once, leaving nothing behind. He took a step toward them. His mouth opened. Colette moved fast. For a woman of 68, she was between him and the children before he finished the step. Her hand was on his arm, her fingers closed on the black wool of his sleeve. "Not here, Weston," Colette said. Her voice was low and firm, the voice of a woman who had managed difficult men her entire life. "Not today." "Those children," he said. His voice was hoarse, wrecked. "Colette, how old are those children?" "Not here." "Colette." "Weston, your mother is in that grave. You will not do this here. You will not." He stared past her. He stared at the twins. He stared at Nora. Nora walked forward. Her legs did not shake. She was surprised by this. She had expected them to shake. She reached the twins. She put one hand on each of their small shoulders. She did not look at Weston. "Come on, babies," she said. "Let's say goodbye properly." She knelt down beside the grave. The twins knelt with her. She touched the wood of the casket with 2 fingers. "Margaret," she said very quietly, so that only Margaret and her children could hear. "Thank you. Thank you for all of it. I will plant the dahlias. I promise." Then she stood. She took the twins' hands. She turned, and she walked back through the parting crowd, past the aunts and cousins and old friends in their cashmere coats, past the man who had fathered her children, and then walked out of her life 5 years ago, and she did not look at him, and she did not stop, and she did not run. She walked. At the car, Bennett said, "Mommy, that man was staring at us." "I know, baby." "Why?" "Because he recognized you." "Do we know him?" Nora buckled him into his seat. She smoothed his wild hair. She looked him in the eye. "No, sweetheart, you don't know him. Not yet. Maybe one day. But not yet." She closed the door. She stood for one moment with her hand on the roof of the minivan, and she breathed. "I did it," she thought. "I did the thing I was most afraid to do, and I did not break, and I did not shrink, and somewhere in there, without my noticing, I stopped being afraid of him. I am not sure exactly when it happened, but it happened. She got in the car, she started the engine. Colette was walking toward her across the gravel. Nora rolled down the window. Nora. Colette's eyes were red. The will reading is Monday morning, 10 o'clock. Harold Pennington's office downtown. She named you. Specifically, you need to be there. Colette, I don't want anything of his. It isn't his, honey. It was never his. It was hers, and she wanted you to have it. Colette reached through the window. She touched Nora's cheek with a cool, dry hand. Please come. For her. Please. Nora closed her eyes for a moment. I'll come. Thank you. Colette stepped back. Nora rolled up the window. She drove slowly down the long gravel drive, past the black cars, past the bare oaks, past the iron gates with their curling letters A and V. In the back seat, Bee was already humming to herself. Bennett was watching the trees go by. Nora drove. She did not cry. She was surprised by this too. She had thought she would cry. It was 3 days before the will reading. Nora sat at her kitchen table at 9 o'clock at night. The twins were asleep upstairs. Biscuit was curled under the table with his chin on her foot. The dishes were done. The toys were in their basket. The house was clean in the particular way small houses are clean when they are run by one person who has nowhere to hide from the mess. She was not thinking about the funeral. She was trying not to. She had poured herself a glass of red wine. She had not drunk it. It sat on the table like a small, dark witness. And then, uninvited, the memory came. It came the way bad memories come. All at once. Not in order. A flash of light, a smell, a sound, and then the whole thing unfolding in her chest before she could stop it. 5 years ago. 7 months pregnant. She had been standing at the kitchen island in the house in Bridgeport. Not this small farmhouse kitchen. The other one. The one with the marble and the copper pots that nobody cooked with and the view of the Sound. She had been slicing lemons for water. Her ankles had been swollen. Her back had hurt. She had been humming. Weston had come in. He had not taken off his coat. That was the first thing she had noticed. He had been wearing his overcoat in the kitchen. Nora, I have to tell you something. Okay, honey, hold on. Let me finish. Nora, sit down. She had looked up. His face had been blank, not angry, not sad, blank. The face of a man who had rehearsed something in the car and was now performing it. I have to tell you something, and you need to sit down. She had put the knife down. She had wiped her hands on the dish towel. She had walked around the island. She had not sat down. She had stood. What is it? Her name is Tessa. She remembered thinking, very clearly, I do not know anyone named Tessa. We have been seeing each other for 8 months. She's pregnant. The room had tilted. Not a metaphor. It had actually tilted. The floor had come up. The ceiling had gone sideways. Her hand had found the edge of the island and gripped. You are pregnant too, he had said. The word too had landed like a small knife. I know this is terrible timing. But I can't keep doing this. I have to be honest with you. I love her. I am leaving. 8 months, she had said. That was what she had said. Not how dare you. Not please, no. She had said, 8 months? Because 8 months meant he had started the affair when she was 3 weeks pregnant, when they had celebrated the first ultrasound, when he had held her hair back while she threw up, when he had told her, in a voice she had believed, that he had never been happier. Nora, listen, I did not mean for this to happen. 8 months. I know how it sounds, but I need you to understand. Get out. Nora. Get out of this house. Now. Right now. Tonight. Nora, we have to talk about this. There are things we have to arrange. The house, the lawyers, the... Tonight, Weston, get your things. Get in your car. Get out of this house. I swear to God, if you are still here in 30 minutes, I will call the police. You are being hysterical. That word, hysterical. She had remembered that word for 5 years. She had turned it over in her mind at 3 in the morning, more times than she could count. He had said it again. You are being hysterical. There is a child involved. There are 2 children involved. We have to be rational about this. Get out. And he had. He had packed a bag. He had taken his laptop and his watches and 3 suits. He had left the rest. He had closed the front door behind him with a quiet, controlled click. And she had stood in the middle of the marble kitchen floor at 9 months, and she had not cried. She had walked upstairs. She had run a bath. She had gotten in the bath fully clothed. She had sat in the water until it went cold, then colder. Then she had climbed out, dripping, and she had called Darla. Darla had answered on the second ring. Honey? He left. What? Weston. He left. He has a pregnant girlfriend. 8 months. I am wet. I am in my clothes. I am on the bathroom floor. Don't move. I am getting in the car. I am coming. Do not move. Do you hear me? Okay? Nora, I will be there in 2 hours. Stay on the phone with me, okay? Okay? Darla had driven 2 hours in the rain. She had let herself in with the spare key. She had found Nora on the bathroom floor, wrapped in a towel now, dry-eyed, shivering. Darla had not said, I'm so sorry. Darla had said, let's get you into dry clothes. Let's get you into bed. We will figure out the rest in the morning. And they had. In the morning, Darla had made a list. Lawyer, doctor, bank, move out. Darla had driven her to all 4 in the order of priority. By the end of that week, Nora had a studio apartment above a bakery, Darla's bakery, and a lawyer and a plan. By the end of that month, the twins had kicked for the first time. By the end of that year, the twins had been born, and Margaret Vance had sent a hand-addressed card that said, I am so sorry. I am so proud of you. I will not push. I will wait. M. Nora sat at her kitchen table. The memory released her slowly, like a tide pulling back. Biscuit was awake. He was looking at her with worried brown eyes. I'm okay, buddy, she said. She reached down and scratched his head. Who was I, she thought, before him? She had not asked herself that question in years. She had been 24 when they had met. She had been a florist at a small shop in the West Village. She had been saving for a dream. She had wanted to open a flower farm, not a shop. A farm. Acres, peonies, dahlias, delphiniums. She had a notebook full of sketches. She had picked a name, Ashgrove Fields. She had told him about it on their 3rd date. He had laughed and said, That's adorable. You are going to live in a mansion, Nora Caldwell. You are not going to grow dahlias in a field. And she had laughed too, because at the time, she had been in love. And when you are in love, the person you love is always right. 5 years of marriage. He had bought her a shop in town as a wedding present, a small, beautiful shop. She had been grateful. She had told herself she was lucky. She had closed the notebook with the sketches, and she had put it in the bottom drawer of her dresser, and she had not opened it again. I lost myself, she said out loud. Biscuit thumped his tail. I lost myself, and I did not even notice. It was a true thing. She said it without crying. She said it the way a woman says, I forgot to buy milk. A fact. A small true fact she had finally, at 34, sat down and looked at. She finished her wine. She went upstairs. She opened the bottom drawer of her dresser. The notebook was still there. She had not thrown it out. She had moved it 3 times. From the Bridgeport house to the studio above the bakery to the farmhouse she had bought when the twins were 2, and she had never opened it, and she had never thrown it out. She opened it now. The sketches were still there. The field map, the varieties, the stupid, hopeful list of flower names written in her 24-year-old handwriting. Café au lait, cornel bronze, labyrinth, strawberry cream. She pressed her hand flat against the page. "I am still here," she whispered. "Hi, I am still here." Monday morning, 10 o'clock, Harold Pennington's office. Nora wore a gray blazer, not black. She had decided on the drive-in that she was done wearing black for that family. Harold met her in the lobby. He was a thin, quiet man of 58. He had been Margaret's attorney for 22 years. He had also, it turned out, known Nora's grandmother, who had gone to school with Margaret at a small women's college in the 1950s. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "thank you for coming. Your children are with my friend in the park across the street. She has a stroller and 2 juice boxes and a very high tolerance for preschool nonsense." Harold smiled, a small, dry smile. "Very good." He led her to a conference room. Colette was already there. So was Weston. Nora stopped in the doorway. "Harold," she said, "I did not know he would be here. He is named in the will as well, Mrs. Caldwell. Unfortunately, I cannot conduct the reading without him present." "Fine." She walked in. She sat down on Colette's side of the table. She did not look at Weston. She did not greet him. She crossed her legs. She placed her hands in her lap. Weston sat across from her. He looked worse than he had at the funeral. A man who had not slept. His tie was slightly crooked. She noticed it and noticed that she noticed. And she looked away. Harold opened a folder. He put on small wire glasses. He began to read. Margaret's will was short. Margaret had been a woman who knew her own mind. To Colette, her beloved sister, she left a string of pearls that had belonged to their mother, and a small oil painting. To Harold, for his 22 years of loyal service, she left a modest sum and a case of wine from her cellar. To her son, Weston Ashford Vance, she left one item, her personal diary, covering the last 15 years of her life. Weston's head came up. "That is all? That is all, Mr. Vance. There must be an error." "There is no error, Mr. Vance. I drafted this document with your mother myself. We drafted it 3 years ago, and we reviewed it again 6 months ago. It is exactly as she wished. The estate? The estate was placed in trust long before your mother's death. She restructured it after your father passed. She had full legal authority to do so. The trust does not convey to you." Weston put his hands flat on the table. He was very still. "Who does it convey to?" Harold turned a page. "To Mrs. Caldwell," Harold said, "in the form of specific bequests and a trust for the children, Bennett and Beatrice Caldwell." The room went quiet. "Specifically," Harold continued, reading calmly, "Mrs. Caldwell receives the estate property known as Ashgrove House, including the adjoining 42 acres of land, free and clear, with all outbuildings, furnishings, and associated personal effects. Additionally, a trust is established for each child, accessible upon their 25th birthday, providing full education through graduate school and an income thereafter." 42 acres, Nora said. She said it quietly, almost to herself. "Yes, Mrs. Caldwell. Ashgrove House, the summer property, on the lake. I've never been there." "Your late mother-in-law wrote you a letter explaining her wishes. She asked that I give it to you to read privately." Harold slid a cream envelope across the table. It had her name on it, Nora, Margaret's handwriting. Nora picked it up with 2 fingers. She did not open it. She set it on her lap. "Harold," Weston said. His voice was tight. "I need a moment with you, privately." "Mr. Vance," I have represented your mother's interests for more than 2 decades. I am bound by her wishes. There is nothing you can say to me privately that will change a legally executed document. I am happy to schedule an appointment if you wish to discuss estate law generally, but this reading is concluded. Harold stood up. He closed his folder. Mrs. Caldwell, may I see you out? One moment, please, Harold. Nora turned. She looked at Weston. She looked at him squarely, for the first time since 5 years ago. She looked at the gray, at his temples, and the lines around his mouth, and the small white scar on his chin she used to trace with her thumb. Weston. Nora. Your mother wrote me letters for 4 years. 4 years. Your mother sent birthday cards to my children. Your mother called me on the anniversary of the day you left and asked me if I was eating enough. Your mother loved me, and I loved her back. This is not revenge. This is not justice. This is not anything to do with you. This is a woman leaving her land to a woman who will actually plant something on it. Do not make this about yourself. I will not let you. He opened his mouth. Do not speak, she said. I am not finished. His mouth closed. I will not keep the children from you. If you want to know them, you will do it the right way. Supervised. Slow. On their schedule. On my schedule. With a therapist. With a mediator. You will earn it, inch by inch, and you will not get it because you want it. You will get it if, and only if, you become a person worth knowing. Do you understand me? He stared at her. Do you understand me, Weston? Yes. Good. Harold, I am ready. She stood up. She walked to the door. At the threshold, she turned back. Colette. Colette was crying silently. She stood up and came around the table. She took Nora's face in her two cool hands. You magnificent girl, Colette whispered. You magnificent, magnificent girl. She knew. She knew this was who you were. That is why she loved you. I loved her too. Go. Read her letter. Go plant her dahlias. Nora walked out. She walked down the long hallway. She rode the elevator down 22 floors. She walked out into the pale October sun. She crossed the street. She found Darla in the park, pushing the twins on the small carousel swings. Mommy, B.A. called. Look, I can go high. I see you, baby. You're flying. Darla looked at her. Well? I need to sit down. They sat on a park bench. The twins swung. The pigeons argued over a crust of bread. Nora opened the envelope with her thumbnail. Dear Nora, I have watched you for 4 years from a distance and close up when you let me. You did not crumble. You did not become bitter. You built something out of what he left you, and the something you built is beautiful, and it is yours. The house on the lake was my mother's. She ran dahlias on those 42 acres. She sold them at the Saturday market in town. Weston never knew. He was not interested in small things. Small things are the only things, Nora. I think you know that already. I give you the house because I have watched you turn a garage apartment into a home, and a home into a family, and a family into a life, on your own, with no help from anyone who owed you anything. I want to give you more than you have had to build for yourself. I want to give you easy ground, for once. I want to give you soft water and a south-facing slope, and a porch that already has a rocking chair on it. You have earned an easier row to hoe. Do not let him back in because he is sorry. Sorry is the cheapest currency a man like my son has ever spent. Let him back in only if, over years, he becomes a man worth letting in because that will take a long time. It may never happen. Do not wait. Live, my dear. Plant the dahlias. Teach those babies to deadhead. Marry again if you find a good one. Or do not. Either way. Live. I loved you like a daughter. You were a better daughter to me than my son ever was a son. M. Nora folded the letter She held it in her lap. She watched the twins swing. And then, for the first time since the funeral, she cried. She cried quietly, with her face turned toward the pigeons so the twins would not see. Darla did not say anything. Darla put one arm around Nora's shoulders and held on. Someone saw me, Nora thought. Someone who mattered saw me. She saw me the whole time, and she left me 42 acres, and that is enough. That is enough to go on. It was not over. Nora had told herself, in the parking garage, with the letter in her lap and Darla beside her, that she had said what she needed to say, that she would not have to see him again. She had been wrong. A week after the will reading, Colette called. Nora, please come up to the house. There is a box. Margaret left a lacquer box in the library with your name on it. I cannot mail it. I need you to come. Colette, I cannot. He will not be there. I promise. I have cleared him out. He does not know. Come on Thursday. Come alone. Leave the children with Darla. Please, honey. This is the last thing. Nora went on Thursday. She drove 2 hours to the Vance estate. She had not been there since the funeral. She had not been inside the house in 5 years and 7 months. She had been married in that house. She had celebrated Thanksgivings there. She had been happy there, at a time when she still believed she was happy. Colette met her at the door. Come in, darling. Come in. Leave your coat. Is he in Connecticut, at the Bridgeport house. I called his secretary. He will not come. All right. Colette led her to the library. It was the room Nora remembered best. Floor-to-ceiling books, 2 leather armchairs, a fireplace with a carved mantel, a round inlaid table in the center of the room, on which Colette had placed a small black lacquer box. It's yours, Colette said. She told me. She said you should open it alone. I will be in the kitchen. Take as long as you need. Colette closed the door behind her. Nora sat down in one of the leather chairs. She pulled the table close. She opened the box. Inside were letters. A stack of them, maybe 30, all tied with a navy ribbon, all addressed to her in Margaret's handwriting, on the thick cream paper with the family crest, all unopened, and a note on top. Nora, these are letters I wrote and did not send. I wrote them over 4 years. I did not send them because I did not want to burden you. I am sending them now because I am dead and cannot burden anyone anymore. Read them if you want. Burn them if you do not. I loved you. M. Nora untied the ribbon. She opened the first letter. It was dated 3 weeks after Weston had left her. Dear Nora, my son is a weak man. I want to say this to you out loud, in writing, because I am afraid that if I do not, you will spend years of your life trying to understand what happened to you, and you will not understand, because there is nothing to understand. He is weak. He has always been weak. He was a weak child. He was a weak teenager. He has become a weak man. I tried. His father tried. It did not take. This Tessa woman is not the first. I have paid off 3 other women in the last 6 years. I did it because I thought I could save the marriage, and because I liked you, and because I could not bear to see you hurt. I should have told you. I am sorry. I thought I was protecting you. I was protecting him. I see that now. I am writing this so that you know. You were not blind. You were not stupid. You were loyal. You were loyal to a man who was not loyal to you. That is not your failure. That is his. Remember this. On the nights you cannot sleep. M. Nora lowered the letter. 3 other women. In 6 years, she sat with that. She let it settle. And what she felt was not rage, not heartbreak. It was, strangely, a kind of relief. I was not imagining things, she thought. I was not crazy. I was not paranoid. I was right. Every time I thought something was wrong, something was wrong. My whole body knew. He gaslit me for years. And I am not crazy. She read the next letter, and the next. Margaret had written to her every month, sometimes twice. She wrote about the weather at the lake house. She wrote about a book she was reading. She wrote about the twins, whom she had only seen in photographs sent by Colette, who had befriended a woman who went to Nora's church. She also wrote about Weston. She wrote plainly. He has married her. She is shallow. She is not unkind, but she is shallow. He has bought her a house in Aspen. He is drinking too much. His father would be ashamed of him. The baby was not his. She lied. She miscarried in her second month of marriage to him, if she was ever pregnant at all, and will not let a doctor confirm. He chose to believe her. I do not. I showed him photographs of the twins today. He looked at them. He said, very quietly, "Mother, I cannot." He set them down. He left the room. He did not ask about you. He did not ask their names. That was a year ago. I have not forgiven him. I do not think I will. Nora closed her eyes. He had seen them. He had known. He had chosen not to come. She had told herself, for 5 years, that he did not know. That if he had known, surely he would have come. Surely some small piece of him, some ember of the man she had once loved, would have flickered at the sight of his own children. But no. He had seen them. He had known their birthdays. He had been shown their photographs by his own mother, and he had set the photographs down and left the room. Nora stood up. She walked to the window. She pressed her hand flat against the cold glass. The rain had started. She watched the gravel drive darken. Mundane, she thought. He is not a monster. He is not even a villain. He is a small, weak, cowardly man. And he will be small and weak and cowardly for the rest of his life, and he will die alone, and he will deserve it. And that is not my problem. That has never been my problem. That is his. She went back to the table. She gathered the letters. She retied the navy ribbon. The door opened behind her. She did not need to turn. The air changed. The smell changed. Cedar, faint cigarette, although he had never smoked. A men's cologne she had once bought him for Christmas. Nora. She turned slowly. He stood in the doorway. His coat was on. His hair was wet. Colette said you were not here. I came back. I saw your car. I sent her out. Weston, just 5 minutes, please. She looked at him for a long time. She did not speak. All right, she said. 5 minutes. He closed the door. She did not sit down. She stood by the table, with her hand on the lacquer box. Nora, the children. They are mine. They are mine, Weston. They have been mine since the moment you walked out. You hid them from me. I did not hide them. You did not look. I did not know where you were. You had my email. You had my cell phone. You had Darla's bakery. You had my lawyer. You had your mother, who had my address the entire time. You are the CEO of a company that bought a rare book archive in Switzerland last year. Do not tell me you could not have found me. He was silent. You saw photographs of them, she said. Your mother told me. She wrote me letters about it. She showed you photos of them at 1 year old, at 3. You looked, you set them down. You went back to Tessa. Nora, do not tell me you did not know. Do not lie to me in this room, in her house, with her letters, sitting in this box. He sat down, not in a chair, on the floor, in his coat, in his expensive shoes. He sat down on the rug in the middle of the library, and he put his hands over his face, and he made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a word. I was a coward. Yes, Tessa lost the baby. I know. Your mother told me. She lost it in February of that first year. And when it happened, I realized what I had done. I realized too late. Yes, I could not come back. I could not face you. I could not face what I had done, and so I stayed. I stayed where I was. I told myself it was too late. I drank. I made money. I bought things. I told myself you were better off without me. I told myself the children were better off without me. I told myself, you told yourself whatever made it possible to keep being a coward. He nodded. He did not look up. Yes. And now your mother is dead, and you are 41 years old, and your wife has left you, and you are alone, and you have a sudden burning need to know your children. Is that about right? Yes. Weston, look at me. He looked up. I do not hate you. I want you to understand that. I used to hate you. I do not anymore. Hating you took up too much space, and I needed the space for other things. I do not love you. I do not feel anything for you at all. Whatever I felt for you died a long time ago. I buried it. I did not even mourn it. But I will tell you something. The children are not a project. They are not a way for you to feel better about yourself. They are not a mirror you get to look into to see a better version of yourself. They are people. They are my people. I have built them a life. And if you come into that life, you will come in on their terms and on mine, or you will not come in at all. Do you understand me? Yes? If you hurt them, if you lie to them, if you disappoint them, even once, I will take them. I will take them so far from you that you will not find them in 10 lifetimes. And your mother's ghost will help me do it. Do you understand me? Yes? All right. She picked up the lacquer box. She tucked it under her arm. I am going to go now. Harold will contact you about a court-ordered visitation mediator. We will do this the right way. I will not speak to you outside of that process. Do not write to me. Do not come to my home. Do not approach my children in public. Do you understand? Yes. Goodbye, Weston. She walked past him. At the door, she paused. I am sorry about your mother, she said. She was a remarkable woman. She deserved better than you. She closed the door behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall. She breathed. 1, 2, 3. She was not shaking. She was not crying. I did it, she thought. I said it. I said all of it. I did not shrink. I did not apologize. I did not make myself small so he could be more comfortable. I am free. She walked out of the house. She got in her car. She drove away from the Vance estate for the last time. The drive home was 2 hours. She did not play the radio. She thought about Margaret. She thought about the letters in the box beside her on the passenger seat. She thought about Weston on the floor of the library, his face in his hands. She felt none of the things she had expected to feel. No triumph, no relief, no pain. She felt tired. She picked up the twins from Darla's. She drove them home. She made them grilled cheese for dinner. She read them 2 chapters of the book about the rabbit who lived in a teacup. She tucked them in. Mommy, Bea said. She was half asleep already. Yes, baby. Did you have a good day? Nora smoothed her daughter's hair off her forehead. Yes, sweetheart. I had a good day. Good. Bea was asleep in 30 seconds. Nora went downstairs. She did not pour wine. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table with Biscuit at her feet, and she looked at the lacquer box, and she did not open it, and then quietly, without warning, the thought came. If I am not his wife, if I am not his anything, who am I? She had been avoiding the question for 5 years. She had been busy. Being a mother is busy. Being a single mother is a full-time occupation that does not permit existential questions. There is always a fever, always a lost shoe, always a permission slip that was due yesterday. You do not sit at the kitchen table and ask who you are. You ask where the clean socks are. But tonight, the twins were asleep. The socks were clean. And the question sat across the table from her like a second guest. Who was she? Not the woman he had left, not the woman she had been before him. Both of those women were dead. She had buried them both without ceremony. Who was the woman who remained? Florist. Yes. Mother. Yes. Daughter of a woman who had died 3 years before Weston left. Who had never met her grandchildren. Friend of one very good friend. Owner of a dog. A person who liked the first cold morning of October and the last warm afternoon of April and the smell of tomato vines and the sound of a good rain on a tin roof. A person who had, in the bottom drawer of her dresser upstairs, a notebook full of flower sketches from 10 years ago. She stood up. She went upstairs. She opened the bottom drawer. She took out the notebook. She brought it downstairs. She put it on the kitchen table next to the lacquer box. Margaret's letter was in her mind. The house on the lake was my mother's. She ran dahlias on those 42 acres. Nora opened her laptop. She typed Ashgrove Fields, LLC. She clicked on Register a Business in Your State. She filled out the form. Her hand hovered over the Submit button. She thought about 100 reasons not to click. The twins were too young. The farmhouse was too far from the lake. She did not know anything about running a flower farm. She had a florist's shop that paid the bills. She had biscuit. She had a life. She had a routine. She clicked Submit. She sat back. Her chest felt strange, lighter, as if a weight she had not known she was carrying had been set down on the table. I just registered a business, she thought. I just registered a flower farm. At 9:45 on a Thursday night, in my pajamas, with a dog on my foot, I am 34 years old, and I just did something I was afraid to do for 10 years. She laughed. Once, a startled small laugh. Biscuit looked up. We are going to grow dahlias, buddy, she said. We are going to grow a lot of dahlias. He thumped his tail. She called Darla. It was late. Darla answered on the first ring. Is everything okay? I just registered a business. What? Ashgrove Fields, LLC. It's a dahlia farm. I'm going to start a dahlia farm. On Margaret's 42 acres. On the lake. I am going to move there. I think I am going to move there. There was a long silence on the other end. Darla? Sorry, I was just crying for a second. Oh no, don't cry, Darla. I'm not sad, you goon. I am so happy. I have been waiting for you to do this for 6 years. I thought you had forgotten. I had forgotten. I know, sweetheart. I know. Will you come with me? Come with you how? I don't know. I don't know yet. Move out there. Eventually. Open the bakery in the boathouse or something. I don't know. It is 11 o'clock at night, and I am making no sense. Darla laughed. It was a wet, surprised laugh. I will think about it, honey. Ask me in 3 months. Ask me in 6. But do not stop asking. I won't. They hung up. Nor sat at the table a little longer. She looked at the lacquer box. She looked at the notebook. She looked at the dark kitchen window, in which she could see her own reflection dimly. A 34-year-old woman, hair in a loose braid, an old sweater, tired eyes, a small real smile. I did not die when he left, she thought, but I have been living like I did. I have been living like a ghost in my own life. I am not going to do that anymore. She closed the laptop. She turned off the kitchen light. She went upstairs. She slept for 9 hours without waking. She had not slept for 9 hours without waking in 5 years. 6 months later. The minivan crested a hill, and the lake came into view. It was early April. The trees were bare. The water was the color of dull pewter. Ashgrove House sat on a south-facing slope above the water, a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch and 2 brick chimneys and green shutters. Mommy, is that our new house? That's our new house, baby. Can I run in it? You can run in it, on it, around it, and through it, Bennett. It is ours. The twins exploded out of the car. Biscuit exploded after them. They ran across the brown grass toward the porch. Bee shrieked. Bennett shrieked back. The dog barked. Nora stood by the car. She put one hand on the warm metal roof. She breathed. The air smelled like wet earth. She could hear a woodpecker far off in the trees. She could hear the lake. A soul. The small sound of wind on water, a sound she had forgotten was a sound. Colette came out on the porch. She was wearing jeans and a cardigan and Wellington boots. She looked 20 years younger than she had at the funeral. Well, darling? It's beautiful, Colette. Margaret had the kitchen redone the year before she died. New stove. She said you would want a gas stove. I want a gas stove. She knew. Come inside. I have made soup. Nora walked up the path. The porch steps creaked. The front door opened on a wide entry hall with a worn rag rug and a staircase with a banister polished by 100 years of hands. A grandfather clock ticked in the corner. She stood in the hall and she breathed. Home, she thought. This is home. I know it the way a dog knows a bone. This is home. The next 6 months were the busiest of her life. She sold the farmhouse back in town. She moved the twins in May, right after the end of the preschool year. She enrolled them in the small village school on the other side of the lake, 3 miles by winding road. She hired 2 part-time workers, a retired botany teacher named Mrs. Orsini, and a 19-year-old boy named Jamie with a strong back and a gentle way with seedlings. She cleared the half-acre closest to the house. She tilled it. She amended the soil. She ordered 3,000 dahlia tubers from 4 different growers in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. She ordered 1,000 peony roots for the following year. She ordered delphinium seed and snapdragon seed and lisianthus plugs. She built a small packing shed with Jamie's help and a rented nail gun. She burned her hands on the nail gun. She swore like a sailor. Mrs. Orsini laughed at her. And through it all, under all of it, the small, steady knowledge, I am building a thing that is mine. No one can take it. No one has given it to me except a woman who loved me, and she gave it to me as a seed, and what grows on it is mine. Weston's supervised visits began in June. They happened at a neutral public park, halfway between his apartment in the city and Ashgrove House. A court-approved mediator sat at a nearby picnic table with a clipboard. 2 hours once a month. That was what Nora had agreed to. That was what she would agree to. He came every time, on time, sober, alone. He did not bring Tessa. He did not bring lawyers. He did not bring gifts that were too expensive. He brought a book for Bee, a pop-up book about butterflies. He brought a small magnifying glass for Bennett, who was obsessed with beetles. Nora watched from a bench 50 yards away. She read a book, or she pretended to. The twins were polite. They were cautious. Bennett did not smile at Weston. Bee smiled, but Bee smiled at everyone. It was her default setting. After the first visit, in the car home, Bee said, "Mommy, the sad man came again." "He's not sad, baby. He is trying." "He looks sad." "He is a little sad, that's allowed." "You can come back from sad." "Okay." After the third visit, Bennett said, in his serious, small judge's voice, "Mommy, I do not want to call him Daddy." "You do not have to, sweetheart." "What should I call him?" "Whatever feels right. What does feel right?" Bennett thought for a long time. He was buckled into his car seat. He was watching the trees go by. "I will call him Weston, for now." "That is fine, baby. That is completely fine." Nora told the mediator told Weston. Weston, to his credit, did not argue. He did not insist on Daddy. He accepted Weston. He used it with the children the next time easily, as if it had always been his name to them. In August, he asked the mediator if he could take the twins to lunch, a public restaurant, 1 hour, Nora nearby. The mediator asked Nora. Nora thought about it for 3 days. She said yes. They went to a pancake place. The twins ate chocolate chip pancakes. Weston drank black coffee. Bennett showed him a picture he had drawn of a stag beetle. Weston listened. He asked questions. Good questions. Nora watched from a booth across the room, reading a book. Actually reading this time, and she felt, for the first time, a small, quiet thing that surprised her. She did not feel pity. She did not feel love. She did not feel nothing either. She felt something very small and specific, the relief of watching a child experience a good thing, the way you feel when you watch your child meet a gentle dog at the park and not be afraid. A simple, contained good. She went back to her book. The best revenge, she thought, is not caring. I did not know. I had always heard it. I did not understand what it meant. It means you are free. It means he is no longer the sun around which your rage orbits. It means he is a man in a pancake restaurant, eating pancakes with your children, and you are reading a novel, and when you are done, you will pay your check and go home, and plant 300 dahlia tubers, and he will not enter your mind again for a day, or maybe 2, or maybe longer. That is freedom. In late July, 1 year and 1 month after Margaret's funeral, the first dahlias bloomed. Nora was on her knees in the dirt between rows 12 and 13 when she saw the first open bloom, a café au lait, pale, milky, enormous, the size of a dinner plate. She had planted it in April and thought about it all summer, and now here it was, open to the morning, perfect. She put her hand over her mouth. Mrs. Orsini. Mrs. Orsini, come. Mrs. Orsini came up at the row in her straw hat. Oh, my stars, look at her. Look at that girl. She's huge. That is a perfect flower, Nora. That is a flower you could put in a magazine. Nora sat back on her heels. She looked up at the sky. It was blue that morning, cloudless, a perfect Maine blue. She looked out over her rows, 300 feet of dahlias, every one of them planted by her own hands, or Jamie's or Mrs. Orsini's, some blooming, some still green, thousands of buds coming on, and the twins, barefoot, up at the house on the porch, yelling for pancakes. I am here, she thought. I am standing on my own earth, looking at my own flower, with my own children yelling for me from my own porch. This is my life. I made this. Nobody gave this to me. I made this. The Saturday market started in August. Nora set up a stall in the town square, as Margaret's mother had done 70 years before. She brought buckets of dahlias, café au lait, strawberry cream, labyrinth, Cornell bronze, all the names from her old notebook. She brought bouquets, wrapped in brown paper and twine. She brought a small wooden sign that Jamie had burned the words Ashgrove Fields onto with a wood-burning tool. She sold out in 90 minutes. She came home elated, dirty, tired, rich by $840, a number she would remember for the rest of her life. She put the cash in a mason jar on the kitchen counter. She called Darla. I sold out everything. Nora! I have orders for next Saturday. 2 wedding consults next week. A woman from a boutique hotel, an hour away, wants to talk about weekly deliveries. Oh, sweetheart. Darla, I know I keep asking. When are you moving? October. What? October. I signed the lease on the boathouse yesterday. I am renovating. I am opening a bakery and coffee shop. I was going to tell you this weekend. Nora sat down on the kitchen floor. Biscuit immediately came to investigate. Darla, I am going to cry. Cry all you want, sweetheart. I am coming. We are doing this. You and me, we are doing this thing. By October, Darla had moved. The renovated boathouse became a small, bright bakery and coffee shop that was open from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, Wednesday through Sunday. It did not need to be bigger than that. It served the village and the summer tourists, and by early November, the regulars from 3 towns away who had found out about the cinnamon rolls. Nora took a loaf of sourdough bread home twice a week. She paid in dahlias. Late October. A gray afternoon. The dahlia season was winding down. The last blooms were coming off. Nora was cutting the last of the café au lait, kneeling in the dirt, when Mrs. Orsini came down the row. "Nora, dear, there is a truck in the drive. A man. He says he is the children's father." Nora sat back on her heels. "Is the mediator with him?" "No, he is alone." "All right, I'll come up." She walked up to the house. Weston was standing next to his truck, not the Range Rover he had driven to the funeral, a plain, dark gray pickup truck with a dent in the tailgate. "Nora, Weston, you are not supposed to be here unannounced." "I know, I am sorry. I called the mediator first. She said I could come if I called first. I tried your cell. You did not pick up." Nora took her phone out of her back pocket. She had 3 missed calls from a number she did not recognize. "I was in the field." "I see. What do you want?" "I wanted to ask if I could take you up on something you said a year ago at the will reading." "What did I say?" "You said, if I became a person worth knowing, if I became that person, over years, I wanted to ask if I am on my way. I do not need an answer. I wanted to ask." Nora looked at him. He was thinner still, but not in the bad way, not the way of a man punishing himself. He had been working outside. She could see. Sunburn on the back of his neck. Rough hands. He was wearing flannel. He looked. And she hated to admit it, so she admitted it only privately. He looked like a better version of himself than he had been at 41. He looked like a man who was trying. "Are you asking me to forgive you, Weston?" "No. I am not asking you to forgive me. I know you do not owe me that. I am asking if I am on the road. I want to know if I am on the road." She looked at him for a long moment. "Walk with me," she said. She led him down to the dock, the old wooden dock that jutted 30 feet into the lake. She sat down on the end of it. He sat down 5 feet away. He did not try to close the distance. The water was still. A loon called somewhere, out in the cove. "I am going to tell you some things," Nora said. "You are going to listen, and you are not going to interrupt." "All right. I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, for me. Hating you was too heavy, and I needed my hands for other things. So I put it down. I am not carrying it anymore. That is done. Thank you." "Do not thank me. You have not earned thanks. I am telling you this because you asked about a road, and you cannot be on a road you do not understand. I am not the one at the end of the road, Weston. I am not the destination. I will not be the destination. There is no version of the future in which I am the destination." He nodded. "The destination," she said, "is you. You becoming a person who can live with what you did. You becoming a father your children are proud of. You becoming a man your mother could look at without disappointment. That is the road. That road does not lead to me. It leads to you." He was quiet. "You are on it. I can see that. I am not blind. You have shown up for a year, on time, sober, alone. You have listened to the children. You have called them by the names they wanted. You did not fight me on any of it. That is more than I expected. I will not pretend I am not surprised. I have been in therapy 3 times a week for a year and a half. Good. I have given most of the money away. I kept enough to live on, The rest is in a foundation. My mother's name. I know that does not. No, that does not buy anything, but it is a good use of the money. Yes. Weston, look at me. He looked. I do not love you. I want you to hear this plainly. I will not love you again. That part of me is gone. It is not coming back. You need to go somewhere else with that hope if you have that hope. If you come here expecting that, you will poison what little we have. Do you understand me? Yes. The children may love you. One day, if you keep showing up, they may not. That is their choice, not yours. You do not get to demand it. I do not demand it. Good. Keep it that way. Yes. That is all I have to say. He nodded. He looked out over the water. The loon called again. Thank you, he said. You are welcome. They sat on the dock for a little longer. Neither of them spoke. The sun moved a hand's width across the skein. A fish rose somewhere out in the cove and sent one slow ring across the flat water. Then Weston stood up. He brushed dust from his jeans. He held out his hand, not to shake, to gesture, to indicate he was leaving. Goodbye, Nora. Goodbye, Weston. She watched him walk up the path. She heard the truck door close. She heard the engine start. She heard it pull out of the gravel drive and fade down the road. She sat on the dock for another hour. Bennett came out eventually with his magnifying glass. He sat down beside her. He leaned his small body into her side. Who was that man, Mommy? That was your father, baby. He came to talk to me. Is he going to come more? A little more. When you want. Only when you want. Bennett thought about it. I want to see him sometimes. Not all the time. And I want to see him with you. Not alone. Not yet. Nora put her arm around her son. Okay, baby. That is exactly right. November came. Then December. Then a long white Maine winter that covered the fields and the lake and the dock and the house. The twins started kindergarten in the village school. Bee made a best friend named Rosie who had freckles and opinions. Bennett made a best friend named Gus who had a collection of 342 insects in labeled jars. They rode the school bus. Nora waved from the porch. Biscuit waved his tail. Nora spent the winter planning. She ordered more tubers. She bought a used walk-in cooler and had it installed in the barn. She took a short online course on floral design. She met with a local wedding planner who had heard about her from the boutique hotel. She signed a contract to provide wedding flowers for 12 weddings the following summer. The deposit paid off her truck. Darla's Bakery and the Boathouse got written up in a regional magazine in February. Business tripled. Darla hired a second baker. Colette came to visit in March. She stayed a week. She slept in the guest room at the top of the stairs. She read the twins' bedtime stories in a dramatic voice that made Bee shriek with laughter. She helped Nora order seed in the morning, over coffee, the way sisters would. You are her now, Colette said one morning. They were sitting on the porch in wool sweaters, wrapped in blankets, watching the lake, which was still frozen. Margaret, I mean, you are Margaret now, in this house. I have sat on this porch with my sister for 40 years. I will sit on this porch with you for as many as you will have me. Come every year, Colette. Come every summer. Come for Thanksgiving. Come for Christmas. Come whenever. I will. Weston's visits continued. Once a month became twice a month. Public Park became Pancake Restaurant became in April a small supervised afternoon at the cottage on the other side of the lake that Weston had rented, so the children had a place that was their father's for a few hours at a time. Nora did not go inside the cottage. She sat in the minivan in the driveway, with Biscuit, with a book. She waited 2 hours. Then she honked the horn. The twins came out. They were fine. They had played checkers. Weston had made them grilled cheese. Bennett had gotten to use the magnifying glass on the underside of a rotting log in the backyard. It had been, from Bennett's perspective, the best afternoon of his life. Bea said, on the way home, "Mommy, Weston is sort of nice." "That is good, baby. I am glad." "He is still sad sometimes. People can be sad and nice at the same time." "Okay." In May, on a sudden impulse, Nora sat down and wrote a letter. She did not mail it. She put it in a drawer. It read, "Margaret, it has been a year and 7 months since you died. I am sitting on the porch of your house. The lake is open again. The dahlias are planted. The twins are 5 now. Bea is reading by herself. Bennett is the village expert on beetles. I have 12 weddings booked this summer. Colette is coming in July. Darla has 2 bakers. Weston comes twice a month. He is becoming a better person. Not the person I married. A different person. A slower, quieter, sorrier person. It is good to see. It does not bring back any of the time we lost, but it is good to see. I am not going to marry him again. I am not going to love him again. I wanted you to know that, in case you were wondering, wherever you are. I am keeping my promise. The road he is on does not lead to me. It leads to him. I think he knows that now. Thank you for the 42 acres. Thank you for the letters. Thank you for seeing me when nobody else did. I love you. I will plant a café au lait by the dock this summer in your name, N. She folded the letter. She put it in the drawer. In June, the dahlias went in. In July, the first blooms opened. In August, Colette arrived and stayed a month. In September, Nora turned 36. And in October, almost 2 years to the day from Margaret's funeral, Nora received an invitation to a charity gala. It came in a plain white envelope. Not black, not cream, not embossed. A simple, folded card from the boutique hotel that had been one of her first big wholesale accounts. They were hosting a fundraiser for a local foundation. They wanted Nora to come as a guest of honor. Ashgrove Fields had agreed to fund a scholarship program for single mothers returning to school. Nora had offered the money in the spring, quietly, a small percentage of her first full year's profits. She had not expected to be a guest of honor. She had tried to get out of it. The boutique hotel had insisted. She called Darla. "I need a dress." "I know you do. I have been waiting 2 years for you to need a dress." They drove 2 hours to a department store in the nearest city. Darla picked out 3 dresses. Nora tried them on. She bought a simple navy silk dress, knee length, a small neckline. The kind of dress that said, "I am not interested in being looked at, and I am also not interested in hiding." The night of the gala, Darla did her hair. Colette, who had extended her visit, who had become, over the year, something like a second grandmother to the twins, had flown back in for the occasion. She stayed with the twins while Nora went out. "You look," Colette said at the door, "like the best version of yourself, not a younger version, a truer one." "Thank you, Colette. Go, have a good time. Drink 1 glass of champagne, not 2. Drive safe." Nora drove to the hotel alone. She parked. She walked in. The gala was in the hotel's ballroom. A string quartet. Dahlias on every table. Her dahlias. She realized with a small, warm jolt. 300 people. Dresses and suits. The governor of the state was there. A novelist Nora had read in college. A minor movie actor who summered on the lake. And, across the room, at the far end of the bar, Weston. She saw him before he saw her. He was talking to a woman, not talking badly, talking politely, the way you talk to a stranger at a bar. The woman was in her mid-30s, dark hair, a kind face, a doctor, Nora would find out later, a pediatric oncologist from a hospital in the city. Weston's date, his first in 2 years, Nora would find out later. He looked across the room. He saw her. He nodded, just once, small, across the room. She nodded back. That was the entire exchange. And Nora, standing at the edge of the ballroom, with a glass of sparkling water in her hand, felt something she had not been sure she would ever feel. Nothing, not the good nothing of effort, not the forced nothing of pretending. A true and quiet nothing. The nothing of a neighbor you wave to across a street. The nothing of a coworker from a job you left 5 years ago. The nothing of a man you used to be married to, who you have, by your own long, slow work, released from your heart completely. She breathed it in. She let it sit. Free, she thought. This is what free is. I did not know. I thought freedom would be louder. I thought it would be a finish line. But it is a quiet room and a glass of sparkling water and a man across the room who has no longer anything to do with me. She turned. She walked into the ballroom. She was, for the next 3 hours, the most composed person in the room. She made her acceptance speech. It was short. 4 sentences. My late mother-in-law believed in small things, she said. She believed that the only real wealth was the wealth you made with your hands. She left me 42 acres and a greenhouse and a letter that told me to plant dahlias. I did. I hope tonight we can help other women plant their own dahlias. Thank you. The room applauded. She drove home at 11 o'clock. She slipped her shoes off at the door. Colette had fallen asleep in the armchair, with a book open on her chest. The twins were asleep upstairs. Biscuit was asleep on the rug. Nora stood in the middle of the living room, her own house, her own land, just outside the window, black under a half moon. She did not cry, she smiled. Spring came again, then summer. The dahlias were in their 3rd season. The field had tripled in size. Nora had hired 2 more workers. Jamie had gone off to college. A girl named Taylor had taken his place. Mrs. Orsini came every morning with her straw hat and her thermos of tea. Bennett was 6. Bea was 6. They had just finished 1st grade. Bennett could name 47 species of beetle. Bea had written, in pencil, on lined paper, a 6-page book called The Horse Who Could Not Find Her Saddle, which she had illustrated herself and which Darla had laminated and bound at the bakery. Weston saw the twins 1 weekend a month, Saturday and Sunday, at the cottage across the lake. They stayed the night now. Nora had agreed to it the previous winter. She dropped them off on Saturday mornings with their duffel bags. She picked them up on Sunday evenings. They came home tired and full of pancakes. Bea said one Sunday in June, as Nora was buckling her into her booster seat, "Mommy, I think Weston is trying." Nora looked at her daughter, who was 6, and who had just said something Nora had said to her a year and a half before. She had remembered it. She had turned it over in her small mind. She had offered it back. "Yes, baby, I think he is. Is that good? It is his job to try. It is our job to watch." Okay. And that was all. Bea moved on to a story about a frog she had seen. In late July, on a Saturday, the day of the biggest farmer's market of the year, Nora was in the field at 5 in the morning, cutting. She was kneeling between rows 4 and 5, cutting café au lait into a black bucket. The sun was coming up over the lake. The air was sweet and still. Somewhere up at the house, Colette, here for the summer, now every summer, by a standing agreement, was making coffee and toast for the twins. Nora cut one perfect bloom. She held it up to the light. It was the best flower she had ever grown, and she laughed, out loud, in the middle of her field, for no reason. Alone, but not lonely, dirty, but not ashamed, 37 years old, sunburnt, hair silvering earlier than she had expected, a small scar on her chin from a teething baby, hands rough from 3 seasons of work. She laughed because she was alive. She laughed because she was here. She laughed because the woman she had been at 29, pregnant, polished, married to a billionaire, sliding lemons in a marble kitchen, humming a song she did not remember, would not have believed that this woman, this one in the field with dirt under her nails and a black bucket of kafaola was her. But she was. She had become her. She cut her flowers. She filled her bucket. She carried it up to the packing shed. Taylor was already there, wrapping bouquets. Mrs. Orsini was sorting by color. The twins came down the lawn barefoot, holding a piece of paper. "Mommy, Colette said to give you this." Nora set down her bucket. She took the paper. It was a flyer from the village store. Someone had left it for her. A notice of a small lecture at the library the following Tuesday. A woman from Portland was coming to talk about starting a business after 40. Colette had circled it in red pen. On the margin, in Colette's sharp, old-fashioned hand, she had written, "You should go. You should be the one giving the talk. Make them invite you next time." See, Nora laughed. Again. "What's funny, Mommy?" "Nothing, baby. Grown-up stuff. Give me a kiss. I have to go sell flowers. Tell Colette I will be back by 2. Okay?" The twins ran back up the hill. Biscuit ran after them. Nora loaded the minivan. She drove into town. She set up her stall. She sold out by 10 o'clock in the morning, a full hour earlier than last year. She packed up. She came home. Colette had made sandwiches. They sat on the porch. In the afternoon, Bee came out with a small black envelope. "Mommy, there is a black envelope on the porch." Nora looked up from her coffee. She felt not fear, not the old tightness, not the old cold. She felt a kind of amused curiosity. "Bring it here, baby. Let's open it together." Bee climbed into her mother's lap. She handed over the envelope. It was not the heavy cream Vance paper. It was a simple black wedding announcement style envelope, the kind you could buy at any stationery store. Nora opened it. It was from Weston. It was an invitation to his wedding. He was marrying the pediatric oncologist. Her name was Margaret. A coincidence, he had written, in a short note folded inside. He had not picked her for the name. They had been together a year and a half. She was, he wrote, the first good thing he had done on his own since the divorce. He did not expect Nora to come. He wanted her to know. He wanted to know if it would be all right with her for the twins to come, with a chaperone, if they wanted to. Nora read it twice. She sat with Bee on her lap, and she read it, and then she looked out over the lake, and she noticed that her hand was not shaking, and her breath was not tight, and her chest was not cold. She felt not happy for him. She would not pretend to that. She felt, instead, a quiet, clean thing. The simple acknowledgement that a man she had once known, who had caused her great harm, was trying to build a real life, the same way any stranger would, the same way she herself had, and that she was, herself, already built, already there, already home. "Bee." "Yes, Mommy." "Would you like to go to a wedding next fall?" "Whose wedding?" "Weston's wedding. He is getting married to a nice woman named Margaret. She is a doctor for children who are sick." Bee considered this. She was 6 years old now. Her vocabulary was formidable. "Yes," Bee said. "I think I would like that. Will there be cake?" "There will definitely be cake." "Okay, I will wear my red shoes." "You may wear any shoes you like, baby." Bee climbed down. She ran off to find her brother to report the news. Nora sat on the porch. She folded the invitation. She put it on the small side table next to her coffee. She looked out over the lake. "Here's what I know now," she thought. "I used to think the best revenge was to be beautiful. I used to think the best revenge was to be rich, or famous, or impossibly kind, so everyone could see what he had thrown away. I used to lie awake in my 20s, planning a version of myself that would wound him. Gorgeous, untouchable, lit from within. A woman he would regret. I spent years designing her in my head. I know now it is none of those things. The best revenge was not revenge at all. The best revenge was waking up one morning in a house I built, in a life I chose, and noticing I had forgotten to think about him for a month. That was the whole thing, the whole, quiet, unglamorous thing. He is a man in another state. He is marrying a good woman. My children will dance at his wedding and come home to me, and I will be here, on my porch, with my sister-in-law, with my best friend 200 yards down the shoreline, with my dog, with my 42 acres, and my Saturday market, and my dahlias, the cafe au laits, the size of dinner plates, grown on my own land, by my own hands, in my own name. I am not the woman he left. I am not even the woman he broke. I am the woman I built after. And she is mine. Colette came out on the porch. She was holding 2 glasses of iced tea. "What is that?" Colette asked, nodding at the invitation. "Weston is getting married." Colette sat down slowly. She set the iced tea on the small side table. She looked at Nora. "How do you feel, darling?" Nora thought about it. "Honestly, Colette, I feel like the day has been long, and I am glad the sun is still up. I feel like I need to take the dog out. I feel like I want to ask Bennett if he wants to go swim in the lake before dinner. I feel like I want to call Darla and ask if she can cover the stall next Saturday because I was invited to give a talk at the library, and I think I am going to say yes. I feel like a woman with a life. That is what I feel like. A woman with her own life, which is the only thing now that I have ever wanted." Colette's eyes filled. "You magnificent girl." "Do not cry, Colette. You will set me off." "I am not crying. I am making a face. It is allowed." They sat on the porch together. They drank iced tea. The sun moved slowly across the lake. Bennett and Bee came tearing out of the house with their swim towels, Biscuit barking behind them. Mommy, come swim." "Coming, babies. Give me a minute. Give me a time." She stood up. She stretched. She felt the small ache in her lower back from a morning of cutting dahlias. She felt the warmth of the porch wood through her bare feet. She felt the simple, astonishing fact of her own life, running past her like a river she had finally, at 37, stepped into. She walked down the lawn with her children. She swam in her own lake. She came up from under the cold water, laughing, her hair slicked back, the twins shrieking in the shallows. Colette waving from the porch, Biscuit barking on the dock, the house behind her white and solid and waiting. The sun was going down. The cafe au laits were open on every row. The evening was coming in. She was home. She was already home. She had been home for a long time. If this story touches your heart, please take one small moment to tap the like button. It helps us reach more women who need to hear stories like this one. If you've ever walked through a storm like Nora's, share your thoughts in the comments below. You are not alone. Thousands of women in this community are walking beside you. And if you believe in stories of quiet strength, dignity, and second chances, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Every week, we share new stories of real women, real courage, and real healing. Now, settle in, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let us take you to the funeral that changed everything. Closing disclaimer. This content has been carefully researched, crafted, and hand-edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories with real lessons and lasting value. Every character, every emotion, and every word is created with purpose, to inspire, to comfort, and to remind you of your own strength.